It begins quietly, the way most global transformations do, not with a roar, but with a whisper that moves through cities, through hands, through factory floors, through the soft rustle of fabric stacked in endless piles. Somewhere in the stillness before dawn, a truck door closes on the edge of a port in Southeast Asia. A young worker wipes sleep from their eyes as bales of clothing, thousands of identical pieces stitched in the shadows of the night, are loaded into a container destined for a world they will never see. The engines vibrate through the ground, a low and patient growl, as if the earth itself is preparing to transport a new chapter of global desire across oceans.
No one stops to consider how strange it is that a shirt, barely finished hours ago, will soon hang on a rack in London, New York, or Dubai for the price of a cup of coffee. No one questions how it can be this cheap, this fast, this disposable. And yet, the secret is woven into that silent morning. The pace, the push, the invisible machinery humming beneath the entire world's appetite for more. Fast fashion did not arrive like a storm. It seeped into us. It threaded itself into our expectations, rewired our sense of value, and stretched time itself until new no longer meant what it once did. A century ago, clothing was slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. People saved for garments. They repaired them, they passed them down. Clothes lived with their owners like companions, not conveniences.
But today, in a world electrified by novelty and impatience, clothing has slipped into a different role entirely. It is a language we speak without thinking, an endless cycle of expression, reinvention, and discard. And behind that cycle lies an economic engine, so efficient, so relentless, that it feels less like a business model and more like a force of nature. To understand why fast fashion is unstoppable, one must return to the moment when desire began to outrun craftsmanship. It was not one moment, but a series of small fractures, a hemline rising here, a shift in manufacturing there, a global trade agreement reshaping the map of production. Factories began to sprout where wages were low and labor was plentiful. Time zones became tools, oceans became lanes of commerce, and supply chains stretched like veins across the planet. And somewhere along this expanding corridor of efficiency, a realization took root. If clothing could be made faster, cheaper, and in far greater quantities than ever imagined, then fashion itself could become something infinite, an unending stream of micro-seasons, trends born and buried within the same year. Economics is often explained in charts and equations, but here it exists in a different form. It exists in the rhythm of sewing machines running through the night. It exists in the slight ache of a worker's wrist as they stitch the same seam 1,000 times. It exists in the flicker of a phone screen as a teenager scrolls through influencers wearing outfits released just days ago. Value, in fast fashion, does not live inside the garment. It lives inside the moment. And moments, unlike fabric, have no durability. Somewhere in the late 20th century, retailers began testing a curious idea. What if fashion didn't need to wait? What if stores could anticipate trends almost as quickly as culture created them? The traditional model, designing months in advance, investing in long production cycles, suddenly felt prehistoric. These new companies sent scouts into the streets, into clubs, into emerging subcultures. They watched what young people wore, what they altered, what they imitated. Then, like storytellers capturing a fleeting spark, they translated those observations into garments that could appear on shelves within weeks. Speed, once the enemy of quality, became the currency of success, and consumers, almost instinctively, adapted. The idea of clothing as an investment faded. Why spend $80 on jeans when nearly identical ones appeared elsewhere for $20? Why cherish a dress for years when a new style would arrive next weekend? A quiet recalibration occurred inside millions of minds. Clothing became temporary. Trends became disposable. And once disposability enters the cultural bloodstream, permanence begins to look irrational. Still, Beneath the surface of this acceleration lies a deeper truth, one that stretches back centuries. Humans have always been drawn to adornment. Clothes are not merely fabric, they are identity materialized. A new outfit carries the promise of reinvention, however small, however fleeting. Fast fashion understood this longing with brutal clarity. It learned to manufacture reinvention itself. Factories expanded, logistics sharpened, retailers built networks that seemed almost supernatural in their efficiency. Garments traveled from idea to hanger in mere days. Algorithms began to predict what customers might want before they knew it themselves. The world was changing, and fashion, once an art, a craft, an industry defined by seasonality, became something else entirely, a behavioral economy wrapped in cotton, polyester, and ambition. Yet, even as this transformation unfolded, there were shadows trailing behind it. Environmental costs, ethical questions, concerns whispered by activists and scholars who saw the hidden price of this speed. But for every warning, demand surged higher. For every exposé on working conditions, foot traffic continued to rise. For every attempt to slow the cycle, another retailer learned to accelerate it. Cheapness is a powerful seduction. Accessibility is even stronger. Together, they form a grip that is almost impossible to break. Somewhere on the outskirts of Dhaka or Guangzhou, a worker threads a needle under harsh fluorescent light. They are part of a system so vast that individual stories blur into statistics, and yet, without these hands, fast, precise, uncomplaining, the entire global rhythm would collapse. Through them, a shirt is born. Through them, a trend becomes tangible. Through them, billions of garments enter a world eager to wear them once, twice, maybe 5 times, before discarding them like shed skin. A strange paradox emerges. The very thing that makes fast fashion unstoppable is the same thing that renders each garment forgettable. The faster it arrives, the quicker it disappears. And so at this early stage of the journey, we stand not inside a factory, nor inside a store, but at the edge of something larger, a global hunger, a restlessness, a desire that has reshaped industries, landscapes, economies, and lives. Fast fashion is not merely a business model. It is a mirror held up to human impulse, reflecting how quickly we chase change and how rarely we stop to question what fuels our pursuit. Story is only beginning, and the deeper we go, the more the threads begin to reveal what truly keeps this machine alive. The pace of the story quickens almost imperceptibly, like a subtle shift in the wind that carries the scent of distant machinery. As the world entered the 21st century, the mechanisms powering fast fashion deepened their reach. They threaded themselves into supply chains so complex and sprawling that even executives struggled to see their full outlines. Ships the size of skyscrapers carried containers stacked like multicolored bricks across dark, heaving oceans. Planes sliced through jet streams with pallets of garments sealed in plastic, racing toward markets hungry for novelty. And on land, a choreography of trucks moved with astonishing precision, flowing through ports, warehouses, sorting centers, and storefronts with the grace of a well-rehearsed dance. In this expanding ecosystem, every second mattered. A delay was not merely an inconvenience, but a fracture in the rhythm that kept millions of garments streaming across borders. Retailers began to cultivate a strange kind of obsession, not with the clothing itself, but with time. Time became inventory, time became risk, time became money. If designs could be approved in days instead of months, if prototypes could be created overnight, if shipments could be optimized to shave off an hour, or a minute, or a breath of inefficiency, then the entire system could accelerate again. Inside brightly lit headquarters in global capitals, teams of designers and analysts watched the world unfold like a living data feed. They monitored streetwear in Seoul, runway experiments in Paris, TikTok trends emerging from teenagers' bedrooms in Ohio. Every day brought a new micro-trend, a fleeting aesthetic, a spark waiting to be captured. These sparks didn't need to last. They only needed to burn long enough for millions of customers to notice and buy before fading into the background of cultural noise. A peculiar relationship formed between consumers and the companies that fed them. On one side, shoppers felt a rush of possibility each time they entered a store or opened an app. Racks changed weekly, collections vanished without warning. There was something thrilling in the impermanence, a sense that the world was unfolding faster than anyone could track. On the other side, retailers watched this excitement with careful calculation. They understood that scarcity, manufactured or real, sparked urgency. They learned that constant turnover created the illusion of endless discovery. People came back not because they needed clothes, but because they needed that feeling. This emotional calculus, quiet and almost invisible, became the backbone of fast fashion's economic power. The industry did not merely sell garments, it sold anticipation, it sold dopamine, it sold the belief that identity could be updated like software, one outfit at a time. Meanwhile, in the factories that formed the industry's spine, the machinery of production evolved, workflows tightened, costs shrank. Global competition pushed manufacturers to adopt techniques that bordered on miraculous in their efficiency. The speed at which raw materials could be dyed, woven, cut, sewn, tagged, folded and shipped defied the imagination. Entire cities reorganized themselves around textile production, their streets humming with the energy of an industry that never slept. But with every advancement came a quiet, uneasy truth. Someone, somewhere, was paying the price for this relentless acceleration. The economics of fast fashion rely on thin margins stretched across vast scales. A shirt that sells for $5 may cost only a fraction of that to produce. Every penny shaved from labor, materials, or transportation becomes a necessary sacrifice in pursuit of volume. Factories operate under immense pressure to meet deadlines that would break slower industries. Workers move with practiced speed, stitching seams so rapidly that hands blur. Supervisors calculate outputs by the minute. Entire communities depend on this rhythm, even as it strains them. And yet, the demand never slows. If anything, demand grows faster than supply chains can keep up. Social media accelerates trend cycles to the point where a viral outfit can ignite global demand in hours. A celebrity photographed in a unique jacket sparks 1,000 replicas before morning. Influencers showcase outfits they never plan to wear twice. And yet, the demand never slows. If anything, demand grows faster than supply chains can keep up. Social media accelerates trend cycles to the point where a viral outfit can ignite global demand in hours. A celebrity photographed in a unique jacket sparks 1,000 replicas before morning. Influencers showcase outfits they never plan to wear twice. In this digital arena, fashion becomes a conversation conducted at breakneck speed, and every participant is both speaker and listener. The industry simply keeps pace with the world's expanding appetite for reinvention. Some economists describe this as a feedback loop, but the term feels too mechanical for something so deeply human. What's unfolding is more like a tide, one that pulls both producers and consumers toward a horizon defined by speed and constant renewal. Companies believe they must accelerate because consumers demand it. Consumers desire novelty because companies never stop offering it. Neither side knows where the cycle began, and neither seems capable of ending it. In stores, this cycle materializes as abundance. Garments overflow from tables and racks, neatly folded in piles so tall they resemble soft architectural structures. Few shoppers pause to consider the magnitude of what they're seeing. Thousands of items sit under the same roof, each one the product of labor, materials, logistics, design, marketing, forecasts, price calculations, and the coordinated movement of global supply chains. And yet, to the casual eye, they appear almost weightless, cheap, interchangeable, often forgotten minutes after purchase. This illusion of weightlessness is not accidental. It is the industry's quietest trick. When an item feels disposable, it encourages volume. And volume is the bloodstream of fast fashion. There is a moment, often invisible, often unspoken, when a customer holds a garment and instinctively weighs not the physical object but the decision. At 6 or 8 or 12, the cost feels negligible, a small indulgence, a fleeting treat. The economics of impulse become essential. If 1 million people buy something without thinking, the system thrives. If they hesitate, the machinery falters. The industry depends on that moment of unthinking permission. And yet, beneath the surface of this global trade, a certain tension begins to stir. Awareness grows. Documentaries expose environmental harm, mountains of textile waste, rivers dyed unnatural colors. Advocacy groups warn of unethical labor. Consumers express guilt, frustration, or a desire to do better. But even as criticism spreads, sales continue to rise. The paradox deepens. The world knows more than ever about the cost of fast fashion, yet participates more deeply in it than at any point in history. This tension is not a flaw, it is evidence of something more profound. Fast fashion has woven itself into the structure of modern life so thoroughly that opting out feels less like a choice and more like a sacrifice. Cheap clothing has become a currency of belonging, affordability, and self-expression. In many households, it is the only viable option. And so, the system expands, factories run through the night, ships cross oceans under moonlight, phones buzz with notifications for yet another sale, and the world continues to dress itself in garments designed to be forgotten. But beneath this steady drumbeat, something else is forming, a deeper shift, a turning point waiting in the wings. Because no system this vast, this quick, this hungry for growth can continue without reshaping something fundamental along the way. When you're ready for part 3, just say, continue. The turning point does not erupt like a sudden crisis. It emerges quietly, the way cracks form beneath a coat of paint, subtle, patient, nearly invisible until the moment they spread across the entire surface. For decades, fast fashion expanded with such speed and confidence that it seemed immune to consequence. But as the 21st century settled into its uneasy rhythm, the sheer scale of the industry began to reveal shadows long concealed by the brightness of its success. In landfills across the world, mountains of discarded clothing rose like artificial hills. Garments barely worn, some still bearing their tags, were pressed into layers that exhaled faint chemical smells when the sun warmed them. Rivers near dying factories glimmered in unnatural blues and reds, their colors shifting with the trends of the moment. Fish disappeared, soil soured. Air grew heavy with microscopic fibers that drifted like synthetic snow. Environmentalists issued warnings, their voices steady, their language urgent. But the problem was not simply pollution, it was pace. The earth itself struggled to absorb the velocity of human consumption. Natural systems that had always adapted to slow cycles of use and decay were suddenly asked to contend with millions of tons of fabric flooding into existence each year. Polyester, derived from petroleum, remained intact for centuries. Cotton demanded vast quantities of water. Viscose required chemicals that seeped into ecosystems. And behind each material stood an equation impossible to balance at such relentless speed. Yet even as the consequences grew more visible, the demand for cheap garments surged. For many, fast fashion offered a lifeline, an accessible way to participate in trends without the financial burden of traditional retail. In economies strained by wage stagnation and rising living costs, the affordability of clothing became a symbol of fairness, even empowerment. To ask millions to turn away from inexpensive choices felt like an unreasonable request, a luxury disguised as moral clarity. And so governments hesitated. Corporations pledged reform but wrestled, with the very metrics that defined their success. Consumers expressed concern but continued to buy. Critics warned of collapse, but the system kept moving, kept growing, kept accelerating. Deep inside the supply chains, far from storefronts and social media feeds, the pressure began to shift from mere speed to something more intricate: optimization. Every segment of the process, from the cultivation of raw materials to the folding of finished garments, became a point of innovation. Companies invested in data analytics that could forecast trends before they fully appeared. AI scanned social media for clues, detecting color preferences, silhouettes, textures, and moods. Orders were adjusted daily, production schedules adapted hour by hour, efficiency sharpened to a razor's edge. It was here, in the quiet hum of servers and spreadsheets, that fast fashion found a new source of power. The industry no longer relied solely on instinct or observation. It tapped into the collective consciousness of billions. A like, a share, a fleeting trend. Each became data, and data became currency. The system could predict when a hemline would shift or when a shade of green would spike in popularity. It could sense the birth of a micro-trend before humans had words for it. And once identified, factories could begin producing at a pace that made slow fashion designers seem like artisans from another era. But with this new strength came an eerie sense of detachment. Clothing felt less like an expression of human creativity and more like the inevitable output of a vast and increasingly autonomous machine. Designs were replicated from runways within days. Influencer outfits were duplicated overnight. By the time a trend reached mainstream culture, it had already begun to die, replaced by the next, and the next, and the next. The acceleration became dizzying. Consumers reported feeling overwhelmed, not by scarcity but by abundance. Walk into a store and the options blurred together, endless racks, endless colors, endless choices. In a strange twist, the very thing fast fashion offered, freedom, began to resemble a kind of quiet exhaustion. The speed of change left little room for attachment. Garments were worn, photographed, and forgotten, swallowed by the churn of new arrivals. The industry responded not by slowing down but by pushing further. Ultra-fast fashion brands emerged, digital-first companies that operated without storefronts, without seasons, without pause. They released thousands of new items per week. Some released thousands per day. Algorithms determined the survival of each design. If a product failed to sell within hours, it was buried, replaced by something more enticing. Fashion no longer cycled every season, it cycled every hour. This shift, this hyper-acceleration, revealed the core of why fast fashion is so difficult to stop. It is not merely a business model, it is a manifestation of human desire amplified by technology and global markets. It appeals to impulses woven deep into the psyche: novelty, belonging, transformation, escape. People do not buy fast fashion because they need clothing. They buy it because it offers a momentary spark of reinvention in a world that grows more uncertain each year. Factories became financially intertwined with the brands they supplied. Communities depended on wages from textile work. National economies, especially in the global South, relied heavily on garment exports. Remove fast fashion, and livelihoods collapse. Remove the demand, and entire industries fall into crisis. The system had grown so large, so interconnected, that its collapse seemed nearly as dangerous as its continuation. People began to ask a question that once felt unthinkable. What would the world look like without fast fashion? The answer was not clear. Some imagined a future of slow, sustainable craftsmanship, a return to clothing made with intention. Others foresaw economic disruption, unemployment, and rising inequality. Still others believed the solution lay somewhere in the middle, in technologies yet to be invented or policies yet to be written. But for now, the machine continued to run. And, as with all systems stretched to their limits, pressure began to build in unexpected places. Workers protested for higher wages, Consumers grew uneasy with the contradiction between their values and their habits. Countries debated legislation to hold companies accountable for environmental harm. The cracks deepened, spreading invisibly beneath the polished surface of the industry. Even so, fast fashion did not slow. It adapted, it evolved, it shape-shifted around criticism, absorbing it, redirecting it, surviving it. Because beneath every cracked riverbed, every overflowing landfill, every exhausted worker, every viral trend, there lingered a truth no one wanted to confront. The system was not built to be sustainable. It was built to be relentless. And in the heart of this relentlessness, as the world began to feel the weight of its own momentum, the story shifted again, toward a deeper revelation about why the industry grows stronger, even as its flaws grow more visible. The deeper revelation arrives not with an explosion of facts, but with a slow unraveling. A realization that fast fashion is not merely an external force shaping the world, but a reflection cast from within it. It mirrors the pace of modern life, the fragility of identity, the instability of economies, and the quiet yearning people carry for something new, something better, something momentarily transformative. To understand why it is unstoppable, one must understand the emotional terrain of a world that no longer moves in seasons, but in scrolls, swipes, and fleeting moments of attention. In the glow of a phone screen, the entire industry condenses into a single motion of the thumb. A model spins in a dress that costs less than lunch. A flash sale banner flickers across the top. The colors are warm, the lighting flattering, the image carefully curated to feel both aspirational and achievable. It is here, within these small, constant seductions, that fast fashion finds its most powerful foothold. The emotional distance between wanting and buying collapses into seconds. One click, and the machine begins to move. In a warehouse miles away, a robotic arm retrieves a package from a towering wall of inventory. Conveyor belts hum, sorting algorithms evaluate shipping routes, trucks reposition themselves for the next departure. The garment, stitched just weeks or days earlier in a factory where the air is thick with lint and heat, begins its quiet journey to a doorstep. All of this unfolds with the precision of a system that has long since mastered the art of convenience. Convenience, perhaps more than affordability, is the true engine of its permanence. People no longer carve out afternoons to shop. They browse between tasks, between conversations, between moments of exhaustion when a small indulgence feels like a balm. Clothing becomes not just a commodity but a coping mechanism, a reward, a distraction. Even those who criticize the industry find themselves entangled in its simplicity. The psychological hooks are subtle, but they are strong. The thrill of expectation, the joy of arrival, the ritual of unboxing, the brief shimmer of novelty. Fast fashion does not simply sell clothes, it sells emotion on demand. And yet, beneath these surface-level transactions lies something far more structural: the architecture of global inequality. The economic gap between nations, the uneven cost of living, the disparities in labor markets, all create conditions in which fast fashion becomes not an option, but a necessity. A student working part-time, a parent supporting a family, a teenager navigating the pressures of appearance. For many, the affordability of fast fashion is not a symptom of overconsumption, but a lifeline that allows participation in social norms. To dismantle the industry would require uprooting far more than shopping habits. It would require rethinking wages, production models, trade agreements, supply chains, and social expectations forged over decades. This is the complexity that traps the world. Meanwhile, companies sharpen their strategies. They produce sustainability reports filled with promises, pledges, percentages, and timelines. They launch eco-collections in shades of green, adorned with labels that imply responsibility while quietly relying on the same manufacturing infrastructure. They encourage recycling programs that accept garments at the front of the store while selling 10 times as many new ones in the back. Critics call it greenwashing, companies call it progress. The truth sits somewhere in the uneasy space between, because even as the industry perpetuates its problems, it also funds the research that might one day solve them, recycling technologies that can break polyester back into usable forms, biodegradable fibers designed to return to the earth, digital fabric printing that reduces water waste. But these innovations face a paradox. They are expensive, and fast fashion thrives on the opposite. To shift towards sustainability requires slowing down, raising prices, and reducing volume. Each of these steps threatens the very foundation of the business model, and so improvements emerge like patches on a ship that remains determined to sail faster, not safer. As governments grapple with the issue, legislation appears in fragments. Some countries enforce transparency, others impose environmental fines. A few experiment with extended producer responsibility, making brands accountable for the waste their products generate. But enforcement is uneven, regulations vary by region. Companies reroute supply chains to avoid restrictive laws. The globalized nature of the industry allows it to slip through cracks in the legal landscape like water through cupped hands. Yet, even as institutions struggle to contain it, fast fashion grows more entangled with culture itself. The rise of social media influencers, once dismissed as a trend, has become a central pillar of the industry. A single viral outfit can ignite a worldwide surge in demand. An aesthetic born on the internet can manifest in stores within weeks. The digital sphere has blurred the line between personal expression and marketing, turning ordinary people into walking advertisements for trends that evaporate as quickly as they form. Fashion halls, try-on videos, and discount codes populate the online world, transforming consumption into entertainment. The act of buying becomes content. The act of wearing becomes performance. The act of discarding becomes invisible. Somewhere in the background, an unease grows. People begin questioning the weight of their own participation. They wonder why closets overflow with items worn once or twice. They sense a kind of spiritual fatigue, a clutter not only of physical things, but of choices, purchases, identities attempted and abandoned. The exhilaration of novelty begins to wane, replaced by a faint hollowness. It is a sensation that whispers rather than shouts, but it spreads quietly all the same. Brands notice this shift. They respond with narratives of minimalism, capsule wardrobes, and mindful consumption, ironically packaged and sold through the same pipelines that encourage endless purchase. Even the solution becomes commodified, folded neatly into the problem. And so here we arrive at a critical realization. Fast fashion is not unstoppable simply because it is cheap or fast or efficient. It is unstoppable because it has woven itself into the psychological, economic, and cultural framework of modern life. It thrives in the gaps between desire and fulfillment, between income and aspiration, between identity and insecurity. It is, in a sense, a symptom of the age. But even symptoms can change, even systems can shift. The question is not whether fast fashion can be slowed, but what will happen when the forces beneath it, economic pressures, cultural movements, technological breakthroughs, begin to push in a new direction. Change rarely begins with sweeping transformations. It begins with subtle dissonance, a growing discomfort, a rising awareness, a quiet desire for something different. And in that quiet, the story turns again, preparing for its final descent toward the reckoning waiting at the heart of this global phenomenon and toward the lingering question of what comes next. In the final stretch of this story, the world seems to hold its breath. The pace does not slow, not truly, but something shifts in the atmosphere, an undercurrent of reckoning, as though humanity has begun to see the outline of the machine it stepped into decades ago. Fast fashion continues its restless churn, but surrounding it now is a growing clarity, a collective awareness that did not exist before. It is the kind of awareness that doesn't stop a system outright, but changes the way people move within it, the way they speak about it, the way they imagine its future. This shift emerges first on the periphery, in quiet conversations, in documentaries watched late at night, in the discomfort felt when a garment rips after a single wear. It emerges in the hesitation before a purchase, the knowledge that a shirt costing less than a sandwich could not possibly reflect its true cost. It emerges in the realization that closets, once symbols of abundance, have become archives of fleeting impulses. In these small, almost imperceptible moments, the story begins to soften at the edges. Yet even now the machine does not weaken, it adapts, it evolves. Companies expand into digital worlds, offering augmented reality try-ons, live-stream shopping events, influencer partnerships that blur seamlessly into everyday content. The digital storefront is open 24 hours a day, its windows illuminated by algorithms that know precisely when a user is most susceptible to buying. Consumption becomes ambient, woven into the rhythm of daily life. If fast fashion was once an industry, now it is a presence. But despite this, the unease grows stronger. Environmental disasters worsen, heat waves intensify, landfills swell past their limits. Storms become more violent, more frequent, more unforgiving. People begin to grasp that climate change is not a future problem but a present one, one that touches food, water, shelter, safety. In this new reality, disposable consumption begins to feel like a relic of an era that can no longer continue unchanged. Movements rise, not in a roar, but in a steady chorus. Thrift culture flourishes, repair shops reopen. Young people challenge the idea that newness is synonymous with worth. Online communities share techniques for mending, upcycling, preserving garments that would once have been tossed aside. Vintage garments, once dismissed as outdated, are reinterpreted as artifacts of craftsmanship lost to the speed of modern production. The shift is not universal, it is not powerful enough to dismantle the system, but it signals something important, a splintering of thought, a widening of possibilities. For the first time in decades, the dominance of fast fashion is not assumed, it is questioned. And yet, here lies the paradox that defines this entire story. Even as people search for alternatives, fast fashion grows. Even as awareness increases, so does consumption. Even as the environmental cost becomes impossible to ignore, the demand for cheap clothing holds firm. The reason is not hypocrisy, it is complexity. Millions live in economies where wages do not stretch far enough to support slow, sustainable consumption. Millions more live in cultures where appearance shapes opportunity, where social belonging is tied to trends, where being left out carries a cost. And in these conditions, fast fashion offers something that feels essential: access. Access to style, access to identity, access to participation in a world that changes faster than any individual can keep up with. It is here, at this intersection of need and desire, that the system finds its strongest anchor. Even so, the story does not end in resignation, it ends in understanding. The forces that made fast fashion unstoppable are not just economic, they are emotional, cultural, psychological. They reflect deeper truths about the world, the turbulence of modern identity, the instability of global wages, the rise of digital culture, the human hunger for reinvention, the widening gap between aspiration and affordability. To confront fast fashion is to confront the structure of modern life itself, and so the question shifts, not how do we stop fast fashion, but what do we become as we learn to live alongside the consequences of our choices? In boardrooms, executives debate new materials derived from algae, fungi, recycled plastics, transformed into fiber. In research labs, scientists push toward innovations once thought impossible: chemical recycling that restores fibers infinitely, biodegradable textiles that leave no trace, manufacturing processes that use a fraction of the water and energy. In policy offices, lawmakers discuss extended producer responsibility, repair mandates, import tariffs on wasteful goods. The future is not yet shaped, but it is stirring. And somewhere in that future lies a possibility that fast fashion evolves into something less destructive, less extractive, less relentless. That it learns to balance speed with responsibility, affordability with longevity, desire with consequence. But this possibility is not guaranteed. It requires imagination, courage, and a willingness to dismantle the logic of disposability one thread at a time. For now, the world stands suspended between two realities, the familiar rhythm of fast fashion and the faint outline of something new emerging in the distance. The final scene returns almost poetically to where the journey began. A factory floor, the steady hum of sewing machines, the quiet concentration of a worker stitching a seam. The fabric moving beneath their hands is more than material. It is a symbol of everything the system represents: efficiency, aspiration, inequality, ingenuity, beauty, waste, hope, all woven together in a single line of thread. Outside, the sun rises over a city waking to another day of choices, millions of them scattered across phones, storefronts, and checkout screens. And with each choice, the story evolves. The machine grows stronger, or weaker, or perhaps simply different. Because in the end, fast fashion's power does not lie in its price, or its speed, or its scale. It lies in the collective heartbeat of the world that created it. A world where identity is fluid. A world where time feels compressed. A world where economic pressures shape daily life. A world where desire is both escape and expression. A world caught between longing for change and clinging to convenience. Fast fashion is unstoppable not because it cannot be challenged, but because it is entwined with who we have become. And as the global stage shifts, as new generations redefine value, as technology reshapes industry, as climate change reshapes everything, this story will continue to evolve, thread by thread, choice by choice, moment by fleeting moment. The documentary ends not with certainty, but with a lingering echo carried like a soft wind through the hallways of the modern world. What we wear is never just fabric. It is the story of the world we live in and the world we hope to create.